Act 1. The Gathering Storm. In the cold, gray landscape of early February 2004, Maura Murray was a young woman seemingly at a crossroads, though few people around her knew the extent of the turmoil brewing beneath her bright surface. At 21 years old, she was a star athlete, a Dean's List student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst's prestigious nursing program, and by all accounts, a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. She was driven, intelligent, and had a clear path laid out before her. Yet, in the days leading up to her disappearance, a series of strange incidents and quiet preparations hinted at a deep, unspoken distress, a personal storm gathering on her horizon that was about to break in the most bewildering way possible. Maura came from a close-knit Irish Catholic family in Hanson, Massachusetts. She excelled in academics and was a standout track star in high school. Her future seemed bright when she accepted an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, following in her older sister's footsteps. But after just 2 years, Maura left West Point under circumstances that remain somewhat unclear, reportedly involving an incident of shoplifting, and transferred to UMass Amherst to study nursing. Despite this setback, she seemed to be thriving at UMass. She was doing well in her classes and had a steady boyfriend, Billy Roche, an Army lieutenant stationed in Oklahoma. But in the months leading up to February 2004, small cracks began to appear in her seemingly perfect facade. In November 2003, she admitted to using a stolen credit card to order food from several restaurants. She was caught, but the charges were set to be dismissed after 3 months of good behavior. Then, just 3 days before she vanished, on the night of Thursday, February 5th, Maura was working her campus security job. During her shift, she received a distressing phone call that left her visibly upset, breaking down in tears. The caller and the subject of the call remain unknown to this day, though many speculate it involved her sister Kathleen, who was struggling with alcoholism. 2 nights later, on Saturday, February 7th, Maura's father, Fred Murray, was visiting her at UMass. They went car shopping together, and later that evening, Fred took Maura and one of her friends out to dinner. After dinner, Maura borrowed her father's new Toyota Corolla to drive to a party at her dorm. In the early hours of Sunday morning, around 3:30 a.m., while driving back to her father's motel, Maura crashed the car into a guardrail. The accident wasn't serious, and she wasn't injured, but the car sustained several $1,000s worth of damage. Her father reportedly wasn't angry, understanding it was an accident, but the incident added another layer of stress to Maura's already complicated weekend. The timeline becomes even more puzzling on Monday, February 9th. At 1 p.m., Maura sent an email to her nursing professors and her work supervisor. She wrote that there had been a death in her family and that she would be leaving campus for a week. Her family later confirmed that there had been no death. This was a lie. Why did she feel the need to create this false excuse? At 1:24 p.m., she called the owner of a condominium rental in Bartlett, New Hampshire, a place her family had vacationed at in the past. But she didn't actually book a room. Around 2 p.m., she made another call, this time checking the voicemail of her boyfriend, Billy Roche. The content of any message she might have heard is unknown. Then, between 3 o'clock and 3:30 p.m., Maura drove her own car, a somewhat unreliable 1996 Saturn sedan, to an off-campus ATM and withdrew $280, almost all the money in her account. After that, she went to a nearby liquor store and purchased about $40 worth of alcohol, Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, vodka, and a box of Franzia wine. Surveillance footage from the liquor store shows her alone, calm, and making the purchase without any apparent distress. Sometime after 3:30 p.m., she got into her Saturn alone and drove north out of Amherst. She didn't tell her friends, her family, or her boyfriend where she was going or why. She had packed a backpack with toiletries, makeup, school books, and birth control pills. She also took the accident report forms from the crash involving her father's car. On top of her belongings in the back seat, she left a printed email from her boyfriend, Billy. The purpose of her trip, her destination, and her state of mind remain complete unknowns. All we know is that Maura Murray was driving north into the darkening afternoon towards the snowy, remote roads of New Hampshire and towards her own disappearance. Act 2. The crash on wild Ammonoosuc Road. As Maura Murray drove north through the winding, snow-covered roads of New Hampshire, the late afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon. She was heading towards the White Mountains, a beautiful but sparsely populated region known for its rugged terrain and harsh winter conditions. What exactly was drawing her to this remote area remains a mystery. Was she seeking solace in the familiar landscapes of past family vacations? Was she running away from something? Her recent car accident, the credit card incident, the emotional fallout from her mother's death years prior, or something else entirely unknown? Or was she simply planning a few days of quiet reflection before returning to her life? Around 7 p.m., she was driving on Route 112, also known as Wild Ammonoosuc Road, near the small town of Woodsville in Haverhill, New Hampshire. It was a dark, rural road, flanked by dense woods and patches of snow and ice. As she navigated a sharp, hairpin turn known locally as the Weathered Barn Corner, something went wrong. Maura lost control of her black Saturn sedan. The car spun and slammed backward into a snowbank lining the eastbound lane. The impact deployed both airbags and left the vehicle facing the wrong way, partially blocking the road. Its windshield cracked and its front end buried in the snow. The crash was loud enough to be heard by residents of nearby houses. At approximately 7:27 p.m., a local school bus driver named Butch Atwood was driving his bus home along Route 112 when he came upon the scene. He saw the black Saturn stuck in the snowbank, its hazard lights possibly flashing. He pulled over and saw a young woman, matching Maura's description, standing outside the car. Atwood stopped and asked the woman if she needed help, if he should call the police. The woman, who appeared cold but uninjured, waved him off. She pleaded with him not to call the police, claiming she had already called AAA for roadside assistance. This was later confirmed to be untrue. AAA had no record of any call from Maura Murray. Atwood, respecting her wishes but feeling uneasy about the situation, knowing that cell phone service was notoriously poor in that remote area, continued driving the short distance to his home. As soon as he arrived home, around 7:34 p.m., Atwood's instincts took over. Despite the woman's assurances, he knew something wasn't right. He called the Grafton County Sheriff's Department to report the accident. The first police officer, Haverhill Police Sergeant Cecil Smith, received the dispatch call at 7:43 p.m. He was already on patrol nearby. He arrived at the scene of the crash at 7:46 p.m., just 9 minutes after Butch Atwood had placed the call and roughly 19 minutes after Atwood had first encountered the woman beside the car. When Sergeant Smith pulled up, the scene was eerily quiet. The black Saturn was there, exactly as Atwood had described it, nose buried in the snowbank, facing west in the eastbound lane. The driver's side door was locked. The windshield was cracked, and the airbags were deployed. But the young woman Atwood had spoken to was gone. There was no one in the car. There was no one around the car. There were no footprints visible in the fresh snow leading away from the vehicle into the woods or down the road in either direction. In the handful of minutes between Atwood leaving the scene and the police arriving, Maura Murray had vanished into the cold New Hampshire night. Act 3. Vanished into thin air. Sergeant Cecil Smith's arrival marked the beginning of a mystery that would only deepen with each passing hour. The scene at the crash site was perplexing. Maura's car was disabled, but not severely damaged. Inside, her belongings were scattered, likely due to the impact and airbag deployment, but nothing seemed overtly suspicious. Her backpack was there. Her schoolbooks were there. Her birth control pills were there. Her cell phone and credit cards were missing, presumably taken with her. Several details, however, struck investigators as odd. A box of Franzia wine was found on the back seat, and it appeared to have been opened, with some wine missing. Red stains were visible both inside and outside the car, consistent with spilled wine. A Coke bottle that reportedly smelled strongly of alcohol was also recovered. This suggested Maura might have been drinking while driving, which could explain her reluctance for Butch Atwood to call the police. Perhaps the most bizarre clue was found outside the car. A clean, white rag was discovered stuffed into the Saturn's tailpipe. Had Maura put it there herself, possibly following some misguided advice about preventing engine damage after a crash? Or had someone else placed it there, perhaps in an attempt to disable the car or even poison the occupant with carbon monoxide if she had stayed inside with the engine running? The purpose and origin of the rag remain completely unknown. Sergeant Smith and another officer who arrived shortly after searched the immediate vicinity. They peered into the dark woods lining the road, their flashlight beams cutting through the cold night air. They drove up and down Route 112, looking for any sign of a young woman walking alone. They found nothing. Meanwhile, news of the accident and the missing driver reached Maura's family. Her father, Fred, immediately drove through the night from Massachusetts to New Hampshire. Her boyfriend, Billy, managed to get emergency leave from the Army and flew in from Oklahoma. They arrived to a baffling and terrifying situation. Maura's car was found, but Maura herself had simply disappeared. A massive search operation was launched in the days that followed. Police, firefighters, fish and game officers, and hundreds of volunteers combed the woods and roads around the crash site. Search dogs were brought in. One dog followed Maura's scent from the car about 100 yards east along Route 112, then abruptly lost the trail in the middle of the road. This strongly suggested that Maura had walked a short distance from her car and then gotten into another vehicle, either willingly or unwillingly. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras scanned the vast, snow-covered wilderness from above, searching for any sign of body heat. They found nothing. The terrain was challenging, the weather was cold, and the search area was immense. After several days of intensive searching yielded no results, the official ground search was scaled back, though Maura's family and dedicated volunteers continued to organize their own searches for months and years to come. The initial investigation was hampered by the lack of clear evidence. There were few witnesses. Butch Atwood was the only person confirmed to have seen and spoken to Maura after the crash. Another resident reported seeing a person moving quickly on foot along the road shortly after the accident, but couldn't provide a description. Some reported seeing other cars stopped in the area around the time of the crash, but these leads never resulted in concrete suspects. The critical window, the first few hours after her disappearance, passed without any solid leads. Maura Murray, it seemed, had stepped out of her car and into oblivion. Act 4. The digital breadcrumbs and cold trails. In the absence of physical evidence, the investigation turned towards Maura Murray's digital footprint and her activities in the days leading up to her disappearance, hoping to uncover a motive or a clue to her destination. What emerged was a portrait of a young woman under significant stress, making puzzling choices, but nothing that definitively explained her vanishing. The emails she sent to her professors and supervisor, falsely claiming a death in the family, remained a key point of confusion. Was this simply a way to get a few days off without questions, or did it point to a more elaborate plan to disappear? Investigators checked with her family and friends. No one knew of any plans she had made, or any specific destination she might have been heading towards in New Hampshire. The call to the condo rental owner in Bartlett was also a dead end. She hadn't booked a room, only inquired. Her internet search history in the days prior revealed searches for directions to the Berkshires, a mountainous region in western Massachusetts, and to Burlington, Vermont. This suggested she might have been planning a trip, but her final known direction of travel didn't perfectly align with either of those destinations. Her cell phone records provided little help. The last recorded activity was the call she made checking her voicemail around 2 p.m. on the day she disappeared. After that, her phone was either turned off or out of service range. Unlike the Brian Schaefer case, there were no mysterious pings in the days or months following her disappearance. Her phone simply went dead. Her bank accounts and credit cards were never used again after she withdrew the $280 from the ATM. This seemed to argue against the theory that she had run away to start a new life. Surely, she would have needed more money eventually. The investigation also revisited the strange incidents from the months and days before she vanished. The stolen credit card usage, while concerning, seemed to have been resolved and was unlikely to be a motive for disappearing. The upsetting phone call she received during her security shift remained a frustrating unknown. Could that call have contained information that prompted her sudden trip? The car accident involving her father's vehicle was another stressor, but her father insisted he wasn't angry, and it seemed unlikely to be the sole reason for such drastic action. Over the years, numerous potential leads and sightings surfaced, but none ever led to Maura. Tips came in from across the United States and Canada. People reported seeing women who resembled Maura in various locations. Psychics offered their visions, but every lead eventually dried up. One particularly strange lead involved a man who gave Maura's father, Fred, a rusty knife that allegedly belonged to the man's brother, who had a criminal past and had acted strangely after Maura's disappearance. However, DNA testing on potential blood traces found on the knife proved inconclusive. The case gained significant traction online, becoming one of the most discussed unsolved mysteries on forums like Reddit and web sleuths. Amateur detectives pored over every detail, proposing elaborate theories, identifying potential suspects, and sometimes even launching their own searches. This intense online scrutiny kept the case in the public eye, but also generated a significant amount of misinformation and sometimes led to harassment of individuals connected to the case. The digital breadcrumbs Maura left behind were too few, and the trails they led down were all cold. Act 5. Theories in the Snow. Years have passed since Maura Murray vanished on that cold New Hampshire night. Her family, particularly her father Fred, has never stopped searching, never stopped hoping for answers. The case remains officially open, a haunting cold case filled with ambiguity and a frustrating lack of closure. Over the years, 3 main theories have dominated the discussion. Theory 1. Lost to the elements. This theory posits that Maura, likely disoriented from the accident and possibly under the influence of alcohol, decided to flee the scene on foot to avoid encountering the police. She may have intended to circle back later or find help elsewhere. In this scenario, she walked a short distance down the road, explaining why the dog lost her scent there, then perhaps cut into the dense woods to hide or take a shortcut. Lost in the dark, unfamiliar terrain, perhaps suffering a head injury from the crash, she succumbed to the freezing temperatures and died of hypothermia. Her body, proponents argue, remains hidden somewhere in the vast wilderness surrounding Route 112, possibly buried under years of snow and forest debris. While plausible, extensive searches of the area have never uncovered any remains. Theory 2. Voluntary disappearance. This theory suggests that Maura planned her disappearance. Overwhelmed by personal problems, the pressure of nursing school, The credit card incident, the car accident, perhaps relationship issues, or the unresolved grief over her mother's death, she decided to leave her old life behind and start anew. The false email to her professors, the withdrawal of cash, and the packing of her car could all be seen as preparations for escape. In this scenario, she staged the accident or took advantage of it, walked a short distance down the road, and was picked up by a prearranged ride, possibly heading towards Canada or another location where she could build a new identity. The primary arguments against this theory are the lack of any further activity on her bank accounts and the immense pain her disappearance caused her family, with whom she was reportedly very close. Theory 3. Foul play. This is perhaps the most feared theory. It suggests that Maura was abducted from the roadside in the brief window between Butch Atwood leaving and Sergeant Smith arriving. The timing is incredibly tight, just a matter of minutes, but not impossible. In this scenario, a predator, either local or just passing through, saw her disabled car and stopped, offering help. When she let her guard down, she was overpowered and taken. Alternatively, the person who picked her up might have initially intended to help, but something went wrong, leading to her death and a subsequent cover-up. The fact that the dog lost her scent in the middle of the road strongly supports the idea that she got into another vehicle, whether willingly or not. Who might have taken her remains a complete mystery. Despite intense online speculation about various local individuals, no credible suspect has ever been officially named by police. Today, Maura Murray's case is more than just a missing person file. It's a modern legend, fueled by the internet and the inherent mystery of a disappearance that seems to defy explanation. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly a life can unravel and how easily someone can vanish, even in an age of constant connection. The image of her abandoned black Saturn, sitting empty on a dark, snowy road, has become an iconic symbol of the unknown. What happened in those crucial minutes after the crash? Where did Maura go? Did she run from the flashing lights of an approaching police car, seeking refuge in the deadly cold of the woods? Did she accept a ride from a stranger, sealing her fate? Or did she simply walk away from everything, orchestrating a disappearance so perfect that it has baffled investigators for nearly 2 decades? The snow on wild Ammonoosuc Road holds its secrets well, leaving behind only the cold, hard silence of unanswered questions.